Greetings my friends, welcome to a new series of realistic railway recreations made using Transport Fever 2, and today we're going back in time to experience the Uxbridge branch of the Metropolitan Railway in the year 1912. My inspiration for this project was sparked whilst researching my previous series set on the modern day Met. I came across the memoir of Walter Atkinson, the chief engineer responsible for building the Uxbridge branch. His private notes were handed down to his son, who many years later passed them to railway author Dennis Edwards, together with photographs taken at the time by Atkinson's assistant. Edwards published them in the magazine Underground. This made me yearn to travel on that railway at a time when the countryside it went through was unspoilt. I have a special interest in the history of this line anyway, having been born quite near to Rayners Lane station, and I'm currently living in Ruislip. Why 1912? The line opened in 1904, but it did not appear on the Ordnance Survey maps until 1912. By setting my recreation in that year, it means I can include district railway trains, which did not begin running through to Uxbridge until 1910. But there had been so little building in the area, effectively the maps show it exactly as it was the day the branch opened for its first passenger. We'll begin in Uxbridge, and I've recreated much of the central part of the town. Of course, I am limited to using the models that are available in the game. Uxbridge had a population of nearly 4,000 and many industries, including timber, flour, iron, brewing and printing, and a medieval layout with a long meandering high street and many narrow alleys leading off, opening into courtyards, tenements and workshops. And we're currently moving up the old high street. And you'll notice here, almost in the centre of the town, where my cursor now is, there was an enormous ironworks. However, we're going to begin the tour by moving across to the southeast of the town towards Vine Street Station, which is here. The Great Western Railway built this station in 1856, and it links Uxbridge to their main branch, it links Uxbridge to their main line running between London and Bristol. This was just a branch line about 4 or 5 kilometres long. It offered passengers roughly one service an hour down to West Drayton, where they could then catch a train to Paddington. The station closed to passengers in 1962, and it closed completely in 1964. We'll turn around, face west, and pass over central part of Uxbridge. This is the Fraser River. This is the Grand Union Canal, and on the Grand Union Canal we've got a number of wharves, and the map shows that there are mills and timber yards in this location. And here we find another station, also built by the Great Western Railway. This is High Street, built with a distinctive bridge on a girder that actually juts out over the street but doesn't go anywhere. The line actually runs to the north. If we just turn around here, I haven't constructed it, but it runs up there, up the valley of the River Colne, and it made a junction with the main line that the Great Western had built jointly with the Great Central from High Wycombe to Paddington. It was built around 1907. The intention was to loop right around the town and join the tracks just south of Vine Street, and the route would have followed where this yellow coloured field is, and then it would have looped across more or less in this direction around here and made a junction perhaps somewhere around about here. The Ordnance Survey map that I'm using to create this layout in 1912 shows the projected layout, though the plan had long since been abandoned. And a map made by Bartholomew's in around about 1904 actually shows the line as having been completed, which is very naughty of them and would have been very misleading to anyone travelling at the time. The station at High Street never saw very much passenger traffic. Didn't even have a goods yard when it opened. They put one in a few years later, but that never got much traffic either, and the whole lot was closed around about 1939. So now we're going to move back into central Uxbridge, and this is High Street again. We're approaching it from the other direction. Notice there are tram tracks. Uxbridge was connected to Shepherd's Bush in West London in 1904, and trams operated by London United Tramways with the number 7 applied to that particular route. This became trolley bus route 607 in 1936, and then bus route 207 in 1960, when the trolley buses were phased out, and it still is route 207 today. Come back into central Uxbridge. Very, very crowded little town, and lots of these long alleyways in all directions full of appear to be terraced houses. It's difficult to know how much green there was in the town, because a lot of these buildings are shown with long gardens or long strips of land attached to them, but whether they were used as workshops or as yards, or whether they just kept cows, or whether they were gardens, I can't tell. Right in the centre of town, the Church of St Margaret's, and here, towards the east of the town, we find the Metropolitan Railway station built by Walter Atkinson. There was a detailed plan of the station published in the magazine Underground, which names all of the buildings. So I have a pretty good idea what went on here. And look, these are the main goods yards, but these shacks and huts here were things like paint shops and tool storage, and there's even one marked cycle storage. So the people who lived somewhere away could easily get to work and have somewhere to put their bikes. This street leading up here is actually Belmont Road, but the entrance to the station, according to the map, was not on Belmont Road. It was here, and led down towards the station, and the buildings here which I'm indicating are shown as offices. There was another entrance shown at the other end of the street, York Road, which is here, and there's not a lot shown on the map here, but I suspect that this is where they would have had the coal yard, because there was nowhere else for it to go. In 1938 they extended the station, or rather they extended the line and built a new station conveniently placed on High Street, and the line here that of this particular of the goods side of the siding was simply extended. So this line of houses here which I'm marking was demolished, and all of these properties were demolished, and they built the railway station here. After they had built it, Belmont Road, the original station here, fell into disuse, and today it's a Sainsbury's car park, and Sainsbury's itself sort of sits a little bit further back, and the goods sheds have all gone, but the modern Uxbridge sidings now occupy all this space. There is a train in, and I think we'll catch it. A word about the rolling stock I'm using for this model, using for this reconstruction. My brain is working faster than my mouth, or perhaps the other way around. This is a lovely model by a modder called Steve M4, and it is district line stock based on their 1905 production, and very suitable to use here. The Metropolitan Railway used slightly different looking vehicles, but I don't have a model that even remotely approaches them compared to this one, so we're going to use this one. People will undoubtedly notice that I am using non-electrified track. Of course all the track was electrified, using the standard London transport system of 4 rails that the various companies had agreed about just before the Metropolitan Railway was completed in 1904. But I don't have a mod for it. There is a 3rd rail mod which I have used on my previous recreations, but I don't like it, so I've gone back to the ordinary track instead, and if you don't like it, I'm sorry, I'm not going to change it now. let's get into our train. There's a message before I go in which says waiting for free path. Now, I've got other trains operating on the tracks, and it means that one of the other trains has reserved the route out of the station, but I can't think which one. I've sorted out the glitch with us not having a free path. It was because a long way down the track a goods train was occupying the section of track that we are trying to get to. There are very few signals in place here. I've used signals, or put signals in only where they're shown on the Ordnance Survey map, and it means that some of the blocks of track are really quite long, and I don't think there was a signal between here and Ruislip, which seems extraordinary, and the reason we couldn't get started was because there was this goods train that was actually manoeuvring into the Ruislip sidings. Anyway, it's now got out of the way. We're looking just back at the signal box at Belmont Road and the front of our train, and we can get underway. I found a couple of copies of Bradshaw's guides on the internet, and one for 1906, which is pretty well in the middle of our period, and shows that the journey time from Uxbridge to Harrow in those days took about 14 minutes. Today it takes 18 minutes. There are 6 stations that did not exist, or station stops anyway, that didn't exist in 1912, and if you factor in 30 seconds for each of those, you've got approximately the same running time. So it looks as though trains today run at almost exactly the same speed that they ran at 120 years ago. Coming down now into the valley of the River Pin, and to our left is the edge of the great estate at Swakeleys. There were 2 grand houses in the area. One was at Swakeleys, the other was at Harefield Place, overlooking the valley of the River Colne, very near Uxbridge, and the 2 gentlemen who owned these estates were the 2 powerhouses behind the formation of the Harrow to Uxbridge Railway Company, which the Metropolitan Railway took over as soon as the line had been completed. Looking to our left, you can actually see the great house at Swakeleys there through the trees. We're now coming up to Long Lane, and there's a station here today. It's called Hillingdon Station. Originally it was called Swakeleys, but it wasn't open until 1923. There's nothing here at all in 1912. And this is the village of Ickenham. Farm to our right is called Long Lane Farm, or it was then. Nowadays it's called Edinburgh Farm. We're approaching Ickenham Halt, and at a halt, of course, if somebody had notified the guard they wanted to get off, or if someone was on the platform waving, then the train would stop. Otherwise, I think it would just go straight on through. So I've set all my trains to slow down to a sensible 15 miles an hour as they go through the halts, to see if anybody wants to get on, and nobody does, so we'll carry on. To our left, here, electrical substation built by Atkinson. A lovely view of the village of Ickenham and the church of St Giles there. And when Atkinson surveyed the countryside, he commented on how empty it was, talked about the fields that were just used essentially for growing grass to be turned into hay to be sold in London, and the occasional the tree lines of elms and the bushes that delineated the fields. Some of the fields were, however, used for animals, for cattle, for the dairy farms, and horses occasionally came out here for holidays from their work. We're passing here under the Great Western Railway, Great Central Railway joint line. It was built in 1907 between High Wycombe and London. And because it was built after the Metropolitan Railway, it had to go over the top. And we're now coming up towards Ruislip. Notice the bridge has got a second deck with nothing going underneath it. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Village of Ruislip begins here and extends up towards the Church of St Martin's that you briefly saw there, and you'll see it again in a second. Ruislip, of course, still has its original buildings and the original signal box, which are all listed buildings. There's the Church of St Martin's. The first sort of development of suburbanisation was just beginning to take place in Ruislip at this time. But essentially it remained a village that was really somewhat isolated from the rest of the world. Before we leave Ruislip, I just want to return to the question of the second deck on the bridge over West End Lane. Let's exit from the train and position ourselves here. We are now in line with the track coming down from Ruislip Manor just before it makes the bend. And if we turn round, a lovely shot of our train there at the station, we can see that the track would be exactly in line with the unused second part of the bridge. So what happened here? Did they make a terrible mistake? Did they build the lower part of the bridge, or the second part of the bridge that's unused, and then realise that it wasn't in line with the station and have to extend the bridge and kink the railway accordingly? Or was there a plan to have a second set of tracks going through the bridge at this point? In which case, where would they have gone? Walter Atkinson does not mention this in his memoirs, and the matter has been discussed on railway forums where people who are pretty knowledgeable about the history of the underground have failed to come to any clear conclusion. So obviously I'm not going to today. We will return to the train, and the bridge, by the way, is exactly the same today. 120 years later, it still has the unused second part. And let's get back into our train. By the way, before we do, just show you the inside, because it does look remarkably like a modern tube train with the benches, the moquette, and so on. We do get that impression of it being a proper London underground style train. Right, we're into the front of the train and we'll be off very shortly. There's a goods train in the siding just ahead of us. The connections to the railway are all work in the direction of Uxbridge, so it's come from Uxbridge and into the sidings. There is no direct connection going towards Harrow. So whether the goods trains always went to Uxbridge first and then finally unloaded at Ruislip and then went back to Uxbridge, or whether they went onto the main track and reversed, I don't know. So here's the famous bend. And now the track is straight pretty well all the way through Ruislip Manor and onto Eastcote. This is Ruislip Manor halt. We're not going to stop here. Wooden platforms, virtually nothing else at the halt at this time, and a cutting was made under the railway to provide access to the farmland, all owned by King's College. Today this is Ruislip Manor and a very busy shopping street. And that is the lower slopes of Windmill Hill, and that's where I live. There's a foot crossing here. The 1912 map shows a footpath on either side of the railway, so I assume there was a crossing. Today there is a footbridge. The land on either side of us here had just begun to be laid out with roads placed by developers, but there were no buildings shown on the 1912 map. Just a few plots have been sort of etched in for future development. And this is Eastcote halt. I've made it look a bit grander. It wasn't much grander than the other halts, but it did have nice fences. It did have a couple of huts on either side, and that's really all you can say about it. Nobody lived in this area at this time. There was a small settlement up the road at Eastcote High Road, but a bit of a walk to get down to this station. The bridge ahead of us was built just to provide farm access. Only the foundations of it still remain. It can be seen just as you approach the next station, which is Rayners Lane. And I've put some cattle in because there were obviously dairy farms in the area, and quite a few of the farms have ponds shown in the fields, so there must have been animals grazing. Slowing down now as we come up to Rayners Lane halt, and like the other halts, just basic wooden platforms and very simple walkways leading up to the road. And here we have the tracks leading off on to the right towards South Harrow, which of course is used today by the Piccadilly line. And if you look over to the right where those tracks are, you will observe a gas holder. In 1855 the South Harrow Gasworks was established to provide town gas to Harrow-on-the-Hill and of course to the school on the top of Harrow Hill. And they got their coal originally from barge to Brentford, brought over the roads. Then when the Met opened the station at Harrow-on-the-Hill, they were able to unload coal there and bring it by road down to the gasworks. And in 1907 a spur was actually built off the railway directly into the gasworks, and we will have a ride on a train going to those gasworks in a later video. And some very interesting manoeuvres required to get the trains out from Harrow and up the viaduct into the gasworks. This is the suburb of West Harrow to our right. The church you can see is St Andrew's. It was only built in 1912, so it was newly placed on the map. And there are a couple of schools marked on the map which are no longer there, but I've put them in as these large sort of yellowy buildings. There's a great central express train to our left, heading up to Nottingham and the north. And a goods train manoeuvring in the sidings at Harrow. Fortunately, we've got a clear run in. I've got a number of trains running on this layout. Quite often we get blocked trying to get across this junction. This is the Harrow North Junction. And I can still remember when I was a very small boy that there were coal merchants operating in the corner of the yard here, and they had little huts that lined the street up to this bridge, Roxburgh Road Bridge. And we're now coming into the centre of Harrow-on-the-Hill, with its rather grand Edwardian houses lining the streets. This is College Road to our left, and Harrow-on-the-Hill itself to our right. You can just see this, the spire of St Mary's and the very large electrical substation that is still there. The signal box that controlled all this, of course, is long gone, as is that water tower. And we're coming into platform 5, the usual platform for Uxbridge trains today, and that's the end of our journey on the Uxbridge branch 1912. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Leave me a like or a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep in touch with future developments. Thanks very much.